Cradle for the Cradle, and Sharmeen Narwani, columnist for the Cradle. Before we get started, I must remind you to hit that like and subscribe button before we kick off. And to remind you that on Thursday, Esteban, Karim, and Charmin will be answering our Patreon subscribers' questions. So, to Patreon subscribers, please make sure to get your questions in before Thursday. Basically, I mean, the way I would describe where we're at right now, I mean, I want us to discuss a few details before we zoom out to the bigger picture. And I feel like we're at like a boiling point where politically we are in crisis as Israel escalates its violations and attacks, especially against Lebanon and Palestine, but also Syria. Now, yesterday we witnessed in here in Beirut the kind of high-profile assassination that we have not seen really since Israel's war on Lebanon last year. And that is not to say that assassinations have not been ongoing, but this guy, Sayyid Abu Ali Haytham Ali al Tabtabai, was serving as Hezbollah's chief of staff, and according to Israel as well, leading the group's rearmament and reorganization. This is the kind of martyr that you don't find out about until after he's been martyred. This is someone who's been around since the 80s, oversaw all battles in Lebanon, oversaw battles in Syria, coordinated across fronts, whether it was Syria or Yemen. One of the founders of the elite Radwan unit. So yesterday was in the Hatahrik area, the strike, which is in the southern suburb of Beirut. That is actually the same area that the late Secretary General Said Hassan Nasrallah was assassinated in. And he was assassinated alongside four other resistance fighters, and dozens of civilians were injured. They have been trying to assassinate Said Abu Ali for years, by the way. There may have been 2, 3 other times where they have failed at the very least. And the US apparently had $5 million reward on him. So this really, when you think about it as, oh, they haven't stopped attacking, all right, but I mean, he made it this far, and I think that it took a lot of time for them to finally nail it. Of course, it's a very big loss for the resistance, but more importantly, in the context we are discussing, it marks a significant escalation that will not necessarily prompt a response from Hezbollah at the moment, but brings us closer to a kind of all-out scenario that we're not sure the nature of. We're not sure the nature of what the nature of that would be yet. This is definitely internal pressure on Hezbollah, but also on the Lebanese government. Before we talk about this further, I just wanted to point out that he was born in '68, and he was leading battles. He took part, like he oversaw the Nabatieh front in South Lebanon in the late '90s, 2000. He was also he led the Khiam front from 2000 to 2008. He commanded battles during the 2006 July War. He took charge of also the resistance's activities after the assassination of Haj Radwan, Imad Mughniye, and he helped establish the Radwan unit in the aftermath. So this we nobody knew about him, right? And I just wanted to point out that even Israel didn't know what this guy looked like, because right after the targeting took place, uh, they were sharing photos of a completely different guy from Hezbollah and saying that it was him up until this morning. I mean, they have the intel, they get the intel, and somehow, whether it's surveillance or through a human tip, and then they carry out the assassination, of course, which is, a violation not only of the ceasefire, but basically extrajudicial killing. And they do it when they receive the intel, and they share a photo of somebody completely different, claiming that it's him. So I just thought I'd point that out. I think that Netanyahu is at a point where he wants to do assassinations is his thing, and it's Israel's thing in general, you guys know. And he wants to be focusing on a lot of qualitative ops, sabotage, and strife, within Lebanon, security and intelligence operations, and he chooses very specific timing for them. And he will keep this up, without necessarily launching a full-scale war. But keep in mind, this is a war. And he vowed yesterday to keep up strikes on Gaza and Lebanon. We will be talking about Gaza shortly. So what do you guys think about what we witnessed here in Lebanon, in Beirut specifically, yesterday?
Karim?
Any thoughts, Karim?
Yes,
I think what happened yesterday, of course, it's an escalation, but also it's the result of the Lebanese government weakness, and also the result of that Hezbollah didn't retaliate or didn't answer any of the Israeli attacks in the past year. And of course, if we read the Hebrew media in the past, like around 1 month, they said that they will escalate against Lebanon. And also, Netanyahu 2 days ago he said that we are active in three fronts, but he didn't name them. But of course, the Hebrew media said the three fronts are Lebanon, Syria, and Iran. And also, there's many talks in the Hebrew media about an attack against Iran. So what happened yesterday? First, it was during the Independence Day of Lebanon, and this was mentioned also by the president of Lebanon. He said, "No, these attacks are unacceptable, and they occurred during the Independence Day of Lebanon." And also, Hezbollah released one statement, one official statement, and uh, we heard two officials from Hezbollah speaking about the matter. Uh, of course, one of them is the deputy in the Lebanese government. He said that the attack should be coordinated with the Lebanese government. For me, I don't see that this is possible at the
The
meantime.
response, you mean? The
Yeah,
response. Oh, okay.
yeah. He just said it 1 hour ago during an interview with the Sputnik Arabic. Yeah, so what happened yesterday is that, as we saw in the videos, and I will replay one of the videos, this happened in a crowded area in the middle of Beirut southern suburbs. And as Sima said, dozens were injured. Around 26 or 25 people were injured. That just they were present in the area, and this shows us that Israel, I think, they chose to escalate, and unfortunately, we'll see more than one attacks in southern suburb maybe during this month or the next month, because clearly they could have assassinated him when he, for instance, exited the area, but no, they chose to assassinate him alongside his colleagues while he was, like, I think it was the fifth floor or fourth floor of in
Yeah,
a
fourth
building.
and fifth floors were both targeted.
Yeah,
I mean, before I let you go, Charmian, I just wanted to say that we saw the theater of the U.S. trying to distance itself. We saw contradictions in Israeli media, with Israel Hayom reporting that Israel did notify Washington in advance, and Wallah news website reporting the opposite, that Israel, citing a U.S. official, that Israel did not notify them in advance. I think this is all theater. It's
yeah.
psychological warfare. It's meant to distance the U.S. from the this is a US sponsored strike, so I just thought I'd point
And
that
also,
out.
Axios citing an American official, he said that we knew that they might attack, but we didn't know when. So there's
Nonsense.
contradictions in these things. But of course, the United States knew, yeah, 100%, because they always tell the United States and coordinate with the United States.
Yeah, this comes after dozens. I mean, in 1 month, Israel has murdered dozens of Lebanese across Lebanon, predominantly in South Lebanon. So,
I mean, I think the Lebanese should fully realize now that the U.S. is okay with this. The U.S. clearly knew about the strike before it took place, even though U.S. officials went back and forth saying, contradicting each other. Israel won't do anything without the United States knowing. Um, and I mean, the Lebanese should know that the Americans are not on your side. Okay. I always say this to Lebanese people I meet, like, you seem to think, like, you've obviously never been to Tehran, Beijing, or Moscow, super modern cities with all the amenities you could imagine, with the, cafes, restaurants, parks, um, public, amenities that, I mean, for some reason, the Lebanese seem to think that the East is backward. But if you go to New York City, for instance, if you go to like many cities across America, if you go to San Francisco now, these places are dumps. But Tehran, Beijing, and Moscow look like they've had facelifts. Okay. So the Americans are not on the side of any Lebanese. You are monkeys to them. You're either um, uh, monkeys that work with them or dead monkeys. They don't care. Okay. And if you work with them and suck up to them, they treat you even worse. All right. So don't forget this. We really, really need to get this in the heads of Lebanese, for the Lebanese en masse to start looking elsewhere, to diversify their relationships in much the same way, Nubi Ahmed al Shara, aka Abu Muhammad al Jalani, um, swept into Damascus and within a year is asking the Russians to come in and help because he realizes the Americans are not going to. So it's something to keep in mind. I mean, I did want to say something about this blast. I feel, one thing also to note is the Israelis are, they're bullies, and bullies are often cowards. What they weren't at all able to accomplish during the war, they hope to accomplish hiding behind the American skirts.
Hmm.
Okay.
Same as in
and
Gaza.
and
Hmm.
betting on, and they're only doing these, they do their strikes incrementally. Like striking the south of Lebanon was very, very carefully done in the direct aftermath of the ceasefire, and because nobody stopped them, they went full, full hog. They wanted, and we had public statements by Israeli officials saying they wanted to flatten Dahia, the Beirut, the suburb, southern suburb of Beirut, like Gaza. They wanted to flatten it. They were not able to accomplish that during the war. And now they're escalating because they've basically been able to in the last year bomb anywhere that they wanted. Typically, Shia majority areas or or areas where a lot of Shia lived, or there was a lot of support for the Lebanese resistance in these areas. Those have been their essential targets, and now they're going into um, an area that is a very, very highly populated area in Beirut. Okay, um, and potentially, if nobody responds, they will start to do what they've done in Gaza. Again, the cowardly Israeli forces only able to do these things hiding behind the American skirts. So the Lebanese have to realize that every single one of Israel's strikes on Lebanon are coordinated and greenlit by the Americans. And why you think the Americans are going to help you out of your financial crisis, get you more electricity, get you more access to drinking water, make you the Paris of West Asia again, you're delusional.
I mean, there's years of examples. Sorry, Karim. I mean, look at Jordan, look at Egypt, look at
Yep.
Qatar, look at the PA, you know?
Yeah.
Look at how the White House stabbed Hamas in the back during negotiations. I mean, it's like endless. Go back in time. You don't even need to go that far back
And
in time.
Iran, and Iran.
Of course.
And Iran is the perfect example of this. The Iranians responded so hard that the Israelis knew that they couldn't do what they do in Lebanon and Syria and Yemen, just, you know, drop some bombs whenever they wanted. They've not hit Iran once since the tentative non-negotiated ceasefire went into effect between those two countries. So, what we learned from this is you have to hit Israel hard, viscerally, you know, shed blood from the Israeli regime, literally make them afraid. And that's the only way. And of course, we calculate that Hezbollah is not going to respond as it hasn't for the last year. What it's waiting for, I don't know. We were discussing in the office at the Cradle before the podcast started, when Hezbollah does respond, what that will look like. Will it be a single, from a single arm of the resistance axis, just the Lebanese resistance? Will it be a multi front attack on the Zionist state, as many people, were hoping would have happened during the war? And something I think we've noted on this podcast before is, um, the Lebanese resistance has gone super silent inside of Lebanon. When the war was going on, you'd think they'd have remained silent, but no. There was sort of a new environment in the last few years, maybe sort of that it started during the Syrian war, in which journalists close to the resistance could go and have coffee with field members, right? Like, so officials who were in the field who would talk to them about what's going on in the field. Of course, they wouldn't publish it, but that kind of conversation could have been passed on and on, right? And it was really a departure from how I knew the resistance when I first interviewed them in 2009, meaning ever in my career. And in subsequent years, they would never tell you, never knew. You could ask them till you were blue in the face, how many missiles do you have? How many mid range do you have? Blah,
Hmm.
blah, blah. Never would you hear anything. And I remember a journalist once telling me a number for Hezbollah's missiles. And I literally, my reaction is like, why are you telling me that? Why are you telling me that? Are you stupid? You know? Um, but suddenly the resistance has gone very silent. And I do know from, well, I'm told from sources not with the, not resistance members, people who were close to the resistance, close to the field, that the resistance is getting weapons. Okay, it is rearming. Again, I don't know if this is true,
Right. We
but
can't.
one of the discussion points was the resistance may have a different kind of weapon. It may have had it before and never showcased it because, in the mind of the Hezbollah Secretary General, who ran the show at the time, he was trying to stop the war, right, as opposed to escalate it. And weapons are to be revealed very, very carefully, only when you have to. It's the Iranian attitude as well. And one of those weapons, interestingly, may be anti-aircraft missiles. And this is something many in Lebanon have been talking about. You know, are we ever going to see an Israeli plane shot down? Now, the Israelis know from the brief 2 month actual hot war they went into with Israel that they couldn't move into an inch of Lebanese territory. They simply couldn't. Okay, despite the, the decapitation of the movement, despite the loss of communications between different levels of command in the movement, the Israeli forces were unable to occupy Lebanese territory. So they know they can't execute a ground war. They're thinking about the air, right? But what if F-16s and F-35s, just a few of them fell from the air? They couldn't execute a war from the air either. Anyways, it's just very interesting. This is all conjecture and discussions with people in this country, but that is something that is being discussed, and I think it's certainly worth mentioning.
I just want to say thank you for Golnara for her super chat. She says that you are amazing, meaning we are amazing.
Thank you to Gulnara Marchese. Thank you so much.
Thank you
Karim, you
for
have any thoughts on?
Very
I mean,
reliable super chat, Golnara. Thank
definitely.
you.
yeah.
You're. Thank you so much. For me, I don't like to assume what situation the resistance is in, what a response would look like, whether or not it is ideal to respond at the time. Again, ideally, response is better because then you create deterrence. But for me, it's like unless it's a very important, qualitative, effective, hurtful operation, I don't see that it is worth it. So it just depends. I don't know where they're at. And I personally won't make any assumptions. But like Charmaine said, there's a lot of discussion going around. I don't know if you have any thoughts, Karim, before we move on to Gaza.
Yeah, I have completely opposite thoughts regarding this. I think Hezbollah is they are very weak and currently, and I think the time has passed for them to respond. And if they respond now, I don't see the reason for them responding, unfortunately, because, as you said, it should be a very powerful response. Because if they respond with a bullet, or if they respond with 1,000 missile, the actions of Israel would be the same. They will open a war on Lebanon. Either if Hezbollah fires one bullet or 1,000 missiles, I don't think the Israelis' response will change. So if they want to respond, it's better for them to respond in a very big scale. And for me, I don't want only Hezbollah to respond. I think Iran and Hezbollah should respond together because Israel attacked them together. And I think the time to overcome Israel or to deter Israel is to initiate anything against Israel. What's happening since October 7? Israel initiated the attacks on Syria, on Iran, on Hezbollah, and everywhere else, and on Yemen. So every time they respond or they start an attack or they start the escalation, and then they wait for the response and they are ready for response. As they said yesterday they said we attacked. If Hezbollah wants to respond, we moved all our anti air missiles and whatever anti aerial missiles into the north, and they like rehabilitated, and they brought some uh, شو ملاجئ
Oh, of shelters.
shelters, yeah, movable shelters, and they rehabilitated some shelters in the north if Hezbollah want to retaliate. This is the weakness of the resistance. They don't initiate attacks; they only respond, and the- يعني since years and years they are saying that there's strategic patience, and the resistance and the people should wait and be patient. But I think this patient
This
really
isn't a normal.
made everybody suffer.
This isn't a
Right.
normal strategic patient situation. This is a necessary break, in my view, because the resistance in Lebanon took a lot of hits. Also, I mean, we all know, we've talked about this numerous times, that the resistance grew very, very quickly and horizontally during the Syrian war, and that created a lot of holes and gaps in security. And so obviously they need to recalibrate now. Um,
Right.
when Israel occupied Lebanon and a resistance grew out of that, right? And eventually it took them a lot of years, well over a decade to kick out the Israelis. And the Israelis thought when they were kicked out in 2000, well, we're going to come back and we're going to show them. And they did in 2006. And they, at that point, the resistance was still thinking right. And they spent those 6 years not just resting on their laurels, but developing capabilities that the Israelis never anticipated. But
Hmm.
then the Syrian war and moving that way, moving so, the Hassan Nasrallah was involved in, negotiations and talks and strategy throughout the region at that point, not just in Syria, in Yemen, in Iraq. So Hezbollah didn't have the right hat on then. It wasn't thinking the right way. It should have focused on its organization. And so I think now, actually, resistance doesn't die. It just morphs. And I think, and people have said there's a possibility that with hit after hit, with this leadership, if Naim Qassem doesn't hear what the base is saying, the very angry base that wants retaliation, then his position is, potentially threatened. And, it's very possible that the more this is ignored, the sentiment is ignored at the highest ranks in Hezbollah, you're going to see a movement that pushes in more hardline elements. Okay, the return of the Hajj Radwans, for instance. Um, Everything's up in the air, and the thing is, we don't know how to discern because we're not hearing anything from the organization in the last few
Exactly.
months.
I think you both make fair points. We have a super chat from Bertography 2468. Thank you so much. Can Gaza be saved? Will resistance come back in full force? My warmest regards to my favorite people in the world. Love and respect from Bahia, Brazil. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly. I'm very sorry if I didn't. You both made points that are valid, and your points meet in the middle. And I think that we have to wait and see, because we don't know what cards they will pull in Lebanon when it comes to internal strife, when it comes to bringing ISIS out, when it comes to what will happen with elections. Will they focus their aggression against the government and the army in different ways? Will they target Nabi Berri, whether politically or physically, who is the Speaker of Parliament and the head of the Amal party, who is basically like holding down the fort right now? We don't know, right? And like, to answer Bertography about Gaza, I don't know if you guys have any comments on Lebanon, or if we can move on since time is of the essence.
No, I just
Um,
want to comment.
quickly, quickly, quickly.
Yeah, yeah, okay. The point is that previously, yeah, we had time, we had patience, because Syria was with the resistance, the government. The declaration of the government was that Lebanon is a country that is represented by the army, by the people, and by the Mukawama, which is by the resistance. Currently, you have Syria on the borders is against you, and there's thousands of people that are willing to come to Lebanon to slaughter Lebanese, and you have a government which is 100% American and with the Gulf countries that are willing to fight you. Yeah, the only thing that is stopping our prime minister to launch a war on Hezbollah is the army itself, because the army structure does not allow this. And you have many people in Lebanon that were imprisoned because they committed massacres in the civil war and killed many people, including Christians and Druze and Shias and Sunnis. Now they are out and now they are holding the power in Lebanon. They are holding the judiciary system and they are holding all the media in Lebanon. This is the difference between now and before.
Seema, I know
fair
you
point,
want to
but
get to Gaza, and we will.
yeah,
I just
because we're
want to
almost
somebody.
at the half-hour mark.
Flower Power is asking, was Iran's strategic patience wrong then? No, it wasn't, because at the time there were actual unwritten rules of engagement in effect among all these adversaries, between the two sides. And Iran's strategic patience was, aiming to hold off a confrontation. They could have been hotheads and escalated, but they wanted not to. Okay, they wanted to be able to choose the time and place of any kind of confrontation. But when Israel unilaterally broke all the understood rules of engagement, okay, a gentleman's deal, if you like, of course, then both Hezbollah and Iran should have tossed out the strategic patience, which was a policy, and moved towards, option A, option B, option C, option D.
Right. Now,
Let's go to Gaza.
yeah, just moving on. I just want to give a quick overview before we
Yeah,
get
but we
into.
have to answer the super chat, which
Well,
is
we're
can
gonna
Gaza be saved?
we're gonna talk about
Oh
Gaza,
yeah, well
so
we're
she
getting
will.
into Gaza now.
Okay.
So I just want to give a quick overview because it's very hard to sum up in detail what has happened. But basically, Israel has escalated, and what it appears to look as though the so-called ceasefire, which is not really a ceasefire, is at risk of collapsing, when in reality, this is what it was intended to be, a war disguised as ceasefire. Now, they have slaughtered dozens in a matter of days, and very few of those dozens were resistance members or commanders. Many of them were children. Just last week, on the eve of World Children's Day, they slaughtered 10 children and one newborn in one night. And the excuse was that they were responding to fire on their troops in South Gaza's Khan Yunis. There were also reports that were denied by some resistance security sources, but could not be debunked, that Israel detained and killed several of the Palestinian resistance fighters besieged in the tunnels and Rafah, who initially were estimated to be at 200, then 150. Now they're saying 80. There was talk of a deal to let these fighters cross the yellow line into the Hamas controlled part of Gaza. That has now collapsed, and it looks like Israel simply wants to kill all of them. 2 days later, Saturday, if I'm not mistaken, Israel claimed a Hamas fighter crossed the yellow line in South Gaza and opened fire on its troops, and it used this incident to slaughter at least between 21 and 24 people in one day. Now, this is obviously Israel exploiting isolated incidents that may or may not have happened to unravel the agreement. And Hamas's spokesman, Azzat al-Rishq, came out and said, I dare you to reveal basically the identity of the gunman that you are saying, opened fire on your troops. Now, the yellow line that we have discussed over and over again on this podcast is now being pushed. The Israelis are pushing the yellow line. It is and
Karim,
advancing
try to show a
westward
map so our
slowly.
viewers can see what Seema's talking about.
Yeah, I mean, do you have the old map of the yellow line? Because the new map of the pushing, I don't have. There may have been something that Hamas put out, but I'm not certain. But so there is a westward advance, and this is resulting in displacement. There is bombardment continuously. They killed at least 4 people today. This is a very blatant breach of the ceasefire when you are slowly but surely pushing the yellow line day by day and taking more and more territory. This is really, I mean, the death toll is climbing again. Hamas met with Egyptian intelligence yesterday, but the talks went nowhere, according to sources. And Washington isn't really dealing seriously with the political disputes among the countries who are supposed to join this so called international force. Azerbaijan, according to Israel Hayom, reporting on Sunday, has backed out. They were initially supposedly willing to be part of this international
So,
stabilization
what are
force.
the countries now that have offered to participate? Because some Arab Gulf countries have not. The UAE
None,
said
yeah,
no.
none, honestly, none of them have been confirmed 100%. But the ones that are still floating around would be Pakistan, Indonesia, Egypt. To what
Turkey.
degree, I don't know. Karim, you were saying Egypt's on board to send troops.
I think they've offered. Turkey has
Turkey is
certainly.
down for it, but don't ask me
Yeah.
how. Turkey wants is willing to fight Hamas apparently because
No, no,
this
no,
won't
no.
be
Hold on.
peacekeeping.
The
It-
okay. So the reason um, Arab or Muslim countries are not willing to participate is because Israel wants this to be a policing force, and the participating countries, or the ones who have offered participation, don't want it to be a policing force. They want to be a peacekeeping force. There's a
right.
major difference. So Israel would like collaborative Arab governments, the kinds like the UAE who hate Hamas and hate the Muslim Brotherhood participating. They don't want countries that are supportive of Muslim Brotherhood and supportive of Hamas, like Qatar and Turkey, to participate. Main difference is, are these troops going to police or are they going to peacekeep? Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to answer the super chat, which is from Brazil.
We we, go ahead.
I
No, no,
can't
go
hear
ahead.
Karim. I can't hear Karim at all.
Yeah, I just want to answer.
Can't hear you.
Bala, Bala, you can hear me.
No, I can't either. I can't hear you.
Yeah.
You can't hear me.
Is that
Karim
divine
wants to answer.
intervention?
كفي كفي
Oh no, Karim wants to answer the super chat. So until he fixes the sound and gives his answer, I was leading up to that. But can Gaza be saved is a very complex question. The only thing I can tell you is
Yeah.
that the US plans are failing miserably. I cannot predict the extent of Israel's occupation, uh, but the siege continues. I believe that Gaza can be saved, but I don't see in the near future how this will be the case. Karim, are you back?
Test, test. Yes,
Yes,
I am back.
Karim is back. Go ahead,
Sorry,
Karim.
yeah. So I wanted to answer the super chat where he asked, "Can Gaza be saved at the current pace and what's happening?" I don't. I am so يعني have negative views about Gaza. Uh, it's not clear currently, but regarding the resistance, of course, the resistance will come back. History and everything tells us the resistance will not die, but currently they are in the weakest point. First, because of the strategic patience. If the new resistance or if the new generation of the resistance ditch the strategic patience, 100% they will come back. And currently, I think they are very weak because of Trump, because Trump is so hard on in this region, and he's acting as if he's the king of the region, and the Gulf countries and Egypt and UAE and whatever, and even the Lebanese government, they are giving the Americans this, and the Americans is deciding everything. And when the United States decides everything, this means that the Israelis decided everything behind the Americans. And unfortunately, who is implementing everything? The Arabs, including the Gulf countries, including Egypt, including also the Muslim countries that are also following the money of the Saudis and other countries. So currently we are in a very difficult situation, but the history and the logic tells us that everything will be back. And of course, in our views, of course, Israel will be weakened and it might not exist in the near future. But currently we are living in a very, very hard situation.
You guys,
Right,
we
about
have to
sorry,
stop
Charmaine,
using
just
this
Gaza.
language. Strategic patience. Strategic patience was an actual policy. That period is over. Any sort of lack of response isn't because of strategic patience. It's because of inability.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
in Hamas's case, I didn't see any strategic patience. Hamas is the one who carried out Al Aqsa flood. And if it wasn't for Hamas doing that, nobody would have carried out an act like that. I think Hamas is naturally, because of asymmetric warfare, in a very weak situation. Hamas is not able to reignite a war and defend Gaza after it's been completely leveled to the ground.
So
Let's be fair.
let's
They need to put their people first. And that's why they're trying to commit to the ceasefire. And you've seen that when fighters, whether in Rafah or elsewhere, do come out and target troops, you've seen what happens. People are massacred in the dozens. So I do agree with Karim, but when it comes to Hamas specifically, I don't think it has anything to do with strategic patience, but rather kind of like what Charmin said, inability in a period of time where they are not in a place where they can continue to
yeah.
wage a full what we saw 2 years ago. They are trying to put their people first, see how they can get uh, uh, aid in reconstruction happening with as best they can. They know that they've agreed to a deal that is not fully in their favor, but they're trying to work with it. And Karim does make a good point that you cannot trust the Americans, but this is the American framework, and it will collapse on top of our heads, but also on top of their heads, and
So
we will see what
Gaza,
happens.
I don't see a collapse of Gaza in the sense that in over 2 years of war, Israel was unable to empty Gaza of its population. Whether that was a goal stated just by random officials, Israeli officials or not, we know that's what the Israelis wanted. So what they've sought to do is at least take the perimeter, right? The internal perimeter of Gaza from north to south. And this is all about the execution of it. But while this so-called, Trump peace plan is being executed, as Seema pointed out, no aspect of it is getting accomplished. And this will become more and more obvious as time goes on. And Trump will either, for the second time, be let down by the Israelis. The Israelis made promises and they broke the ceasefire and we're full on war again. Or he will draw a line. And, later, maybe in the podcast, we can discuss why that would happen in the United States. Uh, we have an article, a feature out today, MAGA versus MIGA, which is Make America Great Again versus Make Israel Great Again, two elements of the conservative right political uh, populations in America. And that may have an effect on this. Uh, but for sure, uh, Gaza situation, I mean, nobody can call it. You can
No.
think that
Sorry,
they'll
sorry,
just
Sharmi.
press on the populations incrementally over time, that everyone will choose to leave. But of course, as we've seen, even by these secretive movements by this Israeli Estonian uh, group of people who have taken Palestinians out of Gaza, they weren't able, they were hitting a wall in terms of which countries would even take a few hundred. Forget, you know, 2 million. So that is, I don't think anyone can call it on Gaza, but I think the Israelis have a slog ahead if they think they can empty out Gaza, take that territory, and leave themselves strong and intact in the process. Because Israel
Karim?
has internally collapsed in many sectors in many ways while they've run these wars around it.
Right. True. Karim, what were you going to say?
I just want to tell Sharmini it's already published and I shared it here now on the podcast, and I will leave a link for today's article, which is about MAGA and MIGA.
And we'll
Allah,
get to that later because it is the one thing I
yeah.
really want to highlight in this podcast. I mean, while we're on this subject of how Israel has, collapsed in many sectors, I think last week I suggested that y'all watch um, Shir Hever, who is gave up his Israeli citizenship. He's an economist based in Germany. He did a 5-part series on Mondo Weiss, talks about Israel's zombie economy. It is something everyone really needs to note. I do want to point out that we at the Cradle, I think it was just today, highlighted that over 1 in 4 Israelis, so more than 25%, I think it's 27%, are now considering emigration per a poll by the Israel Democracy Institute. This is a crisis of confidence. You can tell yourself that, oh, it's no, Israel's just getting stronger. It isn't. While this figure of 27% includes 30% of Palestinians with Israeli citizenship and 26% of Jewish Israeli citizens, the disillusionment goes across very key communities. Among Jewish Israelis, 60% of young secular Jews, the ones who started, uh, established the state, basically, 60% of young secular Jews say they want to leave Israel. The figure climbs to 80% among high income Jewish Israelis holding a foreign passport. So, those with higher education, global mobility jobs, or prior time living abroad show the strongest desire to exit. Um, Respondents cited cost of living, insecurity, political turmoil, and the sense of no future for my children as primary reasons for wanting to emigrate. And family ties remain the main factor keeping many from leaving. If they didn't have those or other family members jumped on board, they would leave. So for those who don't think the Israeli frog is being boiled, just 2 years into this war, that is clearly not the case. You would have a major exodus if, in fact, entire families could get on board this. And I think it just goes to show, whatever the case is, Jewish Israelis themselves have seen behind the curtain. They see the weakness of the institutions. They see the weakness of the army, of their political strategists, and where they've taken them in these last few years. And they don't want to stay.
Fair point. That's true.
Hopefully.
Karim, was there something about Gaza that you wanted to say,
About Gaza, no?
or no? Oh
No,
no, I mean, I think I just wanted to point out and remind people that although like the resistance is in a very compromising situation, it is intact to a degree. It has enjoyed a renewed popularity. There has been a surge in popularity of Hamas in Gaza because of
Yeah,
improved security.
yeah.
So that, I mean, if can Gaza be saved territorially, we don't know the extent to it. You've seen what has happened to Gaza, so you don't need me to answer such a, I
Yeah,
don't need
guys,
to answer in
because when
that sense.
Israel
But
collapses, Gaza will move back to occupied Palestine.
we talked about the scheme to get Palestinians out of Gaza through the Al Majd Europe Association, but that still does not amount to emptying Gaza out in the way they would have liked to.
Mm.
Now, right now, what Israel's doing is accusing Hamas of ending the ceasefire. Hamas has denied that. As I said, they're continuing to expand. They're continuing to target children and use excuses. And on the level of, the US plan, again, I just wanted to wrap up by saying again that it's collapsing. We don't know what the transition will look like. We mentioned that they established this new coordination center in Kiryat Gat. The US is now scaling down its presence there to supposedly make way for the transition to the board of peace, which again, we don't know what willing partners we have and to what degree they are willing. So it's not a very promising situation for them either, and we have to wait and see what happens. There are currently only 3 captives left in Gaza because today the Israelis themselves found an Israeli captive soldier. That leaves 3 left. One of them is not an Israeli Jewish soldier, but a Thai worker, if I'm not mistaken. And the other 2 are yet to be retrieved by the resistance or the Red Cross or the Israelis. So after the 3 are found or retrieved, we also don't know what will happen. That may be the only thing holding Israel back from resuming the genocide. And before we move on, there was a feature that we had last week that unpacks why the so-called phase 2 of the Gaza ceasefire has effectively collapsed. It was by Mohammed Al-Ayoubi, a Gaza writer who contributes often to the Cradle. And this is not because of delays or misunderstandings, but because literally the deal was never meant to move forward in the first place. It was designed as a tactical pause and definitely not a pathway to ending the war. And you can see that in Lebanon as well. And Washington plays this double game by, pressuring Israel to publicly comply, but privately giving Tel Aviv the freedom to do whatever it wants. And in this feature, I don't want to burn it for you guys, but there's a list of things, reasons why Israel does not want to proceed to phase 2. First of all, advancing to phase 2 would confirm their military failure against Hamas, plus their failure to retrieve captives. Number 2, Washington's double stance allows Israel to stall indefinitely, so this is perfect for them. And then keep in mind, we just discussed phase 2 isn't even clear yet. So it's like a dream to stay in in phase one. You'd expect that Israel would want to move to phase two because that's when Hamas magically gets disarmed. But no, they're very happy in phase one. Number three, the Israeli far right, as they call them, see withdrawal as capitulation. So any step forward in the ceasefire again will threaten Netanyahu's coalition and could trigger some kind of political collapse. Number four, Israel wants through negotiations what it couldn't win on the battlefield, which we also see in Lebanon, and that is, forced disarmament, destruction of tunnels, permanent foreign oversight, separating Gaza from the West Bank. It's a shame we can't talk about the West Bank much today, where attacks by settlers and soldiers is they are rampaging, and entrenching the yellow line buffer zone. So I thought I would point you to that feature because I enjoyed it very much. And just quickly, I wanted to go back to this idea of not no matter how much you try to please the Americans, they will stab you in the back. And same with the Israelis. If you look at the PA and its coordination with Israel, they hate the PA. Again, they want to dismantle it. They want it to cease existing. And PA is the number one example of like a good boy, And I saw something today in the Israeli media, actually, which was, an Israeli Knesset member of Palestinian origin who is a total Zionist. Netanyahu wants to get rid of him too. His name is Mansour Abbas, right? He leads the Islamic movement, which is brotherhood essentially. He represents it, and he's been one of the strongest advocates of the idea of coexistence, of the idea that Israel is a fully Jewish state, which has contributed to fracturing Palestinian parties. And on top of that, he's aligned himself with Israeli parties against other Palestinian or Arab, as they call them, parties in the Knesset. And and Netanyahu basically hinted at banning this movement and kind of, getting rid of him. So even the Zionists, whether it's the PA or the Palestinians with Israeli citizenship, who they want to eliminate them. They want to eliminate any Palestinian political presence inside Israel, whether it's in the 48 or in the West Bank or Jerusalem or in Gaza. So again, this is just a testament to, both ways they hate you and they want to destroy you. They're not favoring Mahmoud Abbas, as far as I'm concerned,
Right.
over Hamas in any way whatsoever.
Like I
And it's
said, you're
always important
either,
to remember that.
if you're Arab or Muslim, the Americans consider you either a collaborative monkey or a dead monkey, and they really don't care of
Yeah,
which
a
one you
hundred
are.
percent.
or a cow. Yeah, if you
Or
have,
or a milking cow. Very good.
yeah.
Amazing. Dog or
Okay.
cow or monkey. All right.
Okay,
Um,
the question then
yeah.
is, where's Trump going to go with this? And, Trump has, at least publicly, almost always shown allegiance to Israel. But he has a very big problem now. He won two elections on the platform of putting America first, above all other issues, above all other countries. But MAGA is now split. MAGA meaning the American right, American conservatives, right? Make America great again. And, in this feature today, the author asks, which flag does the movement follow, America's or Israel's? You cannot follow both. Okay. We're now seeing that conservatives are being labeled MIGA. They're calling themselves that too. But what they're doing is, in essence, confirming what people have suspected for many, many years, that Zionists have allegiance to Israel over America. Okay. And I don't know why they're identifying themselves as MIGA, because this is a self own, if you ask me, a self goal or own
Hmm.
goal. But this, um, Benjamin Netanyahu himself has said, you can't, this is a direct quote, you can't be MAGA if you're anti Israel. Think about that. You can't be Make America Great Again if you're anti Israel. So he has literally underlined the fight. And this
Hmm.
fight is now manifesting and has become clear to anyone watching what's happening. This fight is not happening behind closed doors in the halls of power anymore. They're happening on podcasts. They're happening on social media. Um, People who consider themselves the MAGA base are turning on each other on this one point, Israel. Okay. So this clash is now a fundamental one, an existential one over whose interests define the American right, the American interest, or a foreign allies. But only one of them can win. Do you guys see this? Only one can win. If you're MIGA, all right, you're not Make America Great Again. You're not America First. If you're MAGA, you can't put the interests of foreign nation over your national interests, right? And MAGA folks don't want foreign wars. They don't want to give taxpayer money to foreign governments, okay? And the Christian ones, I'm not talking about the evangelical ones, are very put off the genocide that Israel is conducting in Gaza. So today, let's look at the accounts, right? Today, MIGA, so the Israeli First Ones, holds institutional power. APAC, the biggest lobby, dominates congressional primaries. Dissent of any kind is punished. Trump's inner circle remains full of hardline Zionists. And, we all know he was proudly bankrolled by the Adelson, the billionaire Adelson family, all his campaigns in his first term and second term. But MAGA, America First, still commands the core base, the rank and file, the masses of MAGA. Support for Israel among Republican voters ages 18 to 49 has plummeted from 65% of MAGA favoring Israel to 50% no longer favoring Israel at all. This was a poll that Pew published in March of this year. Okay, so 8 months ago. And that number has almost certainly increased since Charlie Kirk's murder and the explosion of social media of MIGA versus MAGA, right? Now, Kirk himself said in July, quote, I've been trying to tell them, and them means Israel supporters. I've been trying to tell them there's an earthquake coming in this country on this issue, and they don't believe me. Now, Kirk was not only talking about October 7th and the genocide that came after, that changed the views of a lot of young conservative Americans. This shift predates October 7th, 2023. In early 2021, according to a poll taken by the University of North Carolina at Pembroke, okay, only 33.6% of young evangelical Christians, a very strong base for the American conservative movement. So 33.6% of young evangelicals between the ages of 18 and 29 said they support Israel. 24.3% said they support Palestine. This is in 2021, okay? In a poll carried out by the same UNCP professors in 2018 show a staggering 69% of young evangelicals said they supported Israel back then, and just 5.6% said they supported the Palestinians. Those numbers had collapsed for Israel among young evangelicals way before October 7th and the genocide. So this backlash against Israel in the US conservative base is real, and it's getting worse. And what does Trump do? And his situation is getting more precarious. Trump is straddling the line, and the line is getting thinner and thinner for him. He supports Israel militarily, but he cuts deals with Gulf Arabs and others, even the Iranians, okay, and the Syrians that anger Tel Aviv. He criticizes, prominent MAGA people who are against Israel, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, but defends, for instance, Tucker Carlson's right to speak. Okay. He fights Iran, he bombs Iran's nuclear facilities, but he refuses to commit to regime change, which is what the Israelis actually want, because Israel has no nuclear weapons. And as our author says today, that this balancing act cannot hold as the pressure builds. The Republican Party must choose. There is no alternative. If the Republican Party returns to its neocon, expansionist, forever wars roots, the MAGA base may walk. If, and by the way, MAGA helped the Republicans get come back into national politics with renewed vigor. All right. They literally were nowhere and vacillating before. MAGA made them. But if Republicans stand with this base, then MIGA, Israeli firsters, must go from the party. But one thing is clear, for one of these two visions to survive, the other must necessarily fail. So a lot to watch there. And where Trump is one kind of barometer of what the thinking, how the thinking is shifting behind closed doors. There are others who are very prominently speaking up, Republican conservatives, evangelicals who've switched their point of view and have become MAGA and dumped MIGA, for us to watch every single day on social media. We're going to get the pulse of this and how it's moving quite easily, in my view.
Yeah, I think we've yet to see what this will culminate in, because there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of dialogue, there's, like you said, podcasts, social media. Nothing is slipping through the cracks anymore, but it's just a question of what this will translate into and what they will be able to do with it. I mean, I just wanted to give an example of how nothing slips through anymore. Mike Huckabee, who's the US ambassador to
Yeah.
Israel, met with Jonathan Pollard, who literally spied for Israel and handed over hundreds of documents to Israel. He's like a hero in Israel, but hated by let's say America firsters. And he possibly handed over intel on America's nuclear activities and so on and so forth. And people are tearing that apart. And then he had to come out and justify this. I mean, these are the kinds of things that the spotlight is on right now. Kareem?
Yeah, I just wanted to. It's more important than that. I think you missed something very important. Is that he handed nuclear,
Yeah.
some of the nuclear program and the nuclear technology that the United States have during the Cold War to Israel to hand it over to the USSR, which is the biggest thing you can do against the United States during the Cold War.
Very good
And
point.
he was released by Trump, if I'm not mistaken. He was released by Trump, and now he's in Israel, and he went and met the ambassador there in Tel Aviv, which made like it was very
Yeah, I mean,
controversial in the media, especially with the people that are the real MAGAs, yeah, not the people that followed Trump because he's like American first, and then they were shocked that he is MIGA, not MAGA. Or maybe he was the MAGA at the beginning, but then he discovered many videos and photos, and then he shifted to MIGA. We have to wait and see.
right. Someone in the comments was like, what if this is all just theater? Like, I'm not here to make any assumptions. I'm just saying, like, there is this conversation being had.
No, no,
People are
sorry,
angry.
yeah,
Sorry, no, I mean in general.
yeah, yeah,
People
yeah.
are angry. I don't know what it will result in.
I,
When
I,
Charmin says that it's either MIGA or MAGA, of course, not both can you win. I just don't know
No,
how,
for
what,
one to win,
I don't
the
think it's
other for one to win and survive, the other has to lose. That's
of
the thing.
course. But my point is, do they
but
have the
lose
balls
what
of
Sharmeen,
steel?
ma. There's يعني the idea of MAGA and MIGA will end in in 3 years, and that's it. It's not a
How?
party. Ma, it's only Trump. Trump did it, and Trump will not be a politician after 3 years, and that's
But
it.
I
It will
think the
die.
issue of Israel transcends Trump's presidency. Like,
Yeah,
this is something.
The
but I
thing
want
here,
what I
here's the
wanted to.
irony:
Yes.
If MAGA, disintegrates or turns on itself and sort of loses its vigor as a result because it's split, um, Democrats have a chance of winning again, right? Democrats don't have this sort of galvanized base. Only, uh, Bernie Sanders supporters and now Zohran Mamdani supporters, those kind of Democrats have like this crazy, crazy grassroots base, right? The Democratic Party has none. If but the Republicans do because of MAGA only. Okay, so if MAGA splinters and turns on itself, the Democrats could come into power again, and Democrats are now like polling at like 90% against Israel. Israel doesn't win.
Yeah, yeah. I just wanted to comment about the question. Is that theater? I am absolutely don't think that this is a theater, because if this is the theater, it already affected Israel negatively. So that's
Mm,
why I don't think it's a
good
negative
point.
thing.
Karim, something for you. Jolly Lollipop, super chat. Pollard was released by Obama, not Trump. Um,
Sorry,
but
Obama.
right. Someone writes the spy who loved Trump. Trump. Rabbi Pollard, LMAO. Right. So, I mean, this conversation, I just want to see what's going to happen with this, where this is going to
Thank
go.
you,
But make sure
Jolly
to read
Lollipop.
the. Thank you so much, Jolly Lollipop. Make sure to read the feature, guys. There's just a little thing we may go over time. I just wanted to bring something up quickly. Karim or Sharmin, I just wanted to talk about Syria for 1 second, very quickly, because what happened yesterday in Homs, basically, um, there are elements, most likely Israeli, trying to ignite basically sectarian strife. Because what
You're
happened
echoing,
yesterday,
Seema. Are you guys
am I?
hearing an echo? Yeah, I'm hearing an echo.
Karim, can you hear an echo?
If there was an aqua, now it's fixed.
Oh,
And you've disappeared.
she says you've disappeared.
Mm-mm.
It wouldn't be the cradle without the technical difficulties. I'm
Did
sure
you
you
say that,
love
or
this.
did someone say that in the comments?
No, I'm saying it.
Okay.
I'm saying it. I don't know if I'm still echoing, but I wanted to say that there was basically yesterday, a bloody crime that took place in Zaydal, which is on the outskirts of Homs in Syria. And apparently,
Yeah.
a Sunni Syrian couple belonging to the Bani Khalid Bedouin tribe were murdered and found dead in their home. All right, so the wife's body was burned. There were sectarian slogans written on the wall with the victim's blood. Very suspicious, if you ask me. Like, Ya Ali, Ya Hussein, and I don't know what. We won't show it here because it's very graphic. But in my opinion, the initial act has Israel's fingerprints all over it, and I'll explain why. Anyway, so this tribe that this couple belonged to got very angry, and the response was like a literal pogrom against the Alawite majority Al Muhajirin neighborhood in Homs. Now, those areas in Homs are all mixed, by the way. It's like Sunni, Alawite, Christian. Anyway, people were killed, properties and vehicles were burnt, people were opening fire at random, exactly like the settler pogroms you see in the West Bank that either happened for no reason or as collective punishment when a resistance operation is carried out. This was justified as revenge, basically. But the problem is we don't know who carried out the crime. We don't even know if it was Alawites. It was set up to be Alawites, but Alawites know they don't have a backbone. They are, for the most part, unarmed. Why would they expose themselves and invite attacks on their communities after what
Exactly.
happened in the coast? So it has Israeli fingerprints all over it. We don't know who did it.
No,
If an
even
Alawite did
even
it, they
even
wouldn't put slogans on the wall.
it has fingerprints of the of Shada's extremists all
Also,
over it. I
yeah,
mean, all these. Let's be honest. All these guys did in the Syrian war is set up, you know, massacres or set up incidents that would justify an action by, those opposed to the Assad government, from externally or expose their own killing of others. They're getting criticism for the continuing killing of Alawites. This is now following, a lot of people ignored that earlier this year. They ignored the slaughter of Alawites, but then started to pay attention when the Druze were getting massacred in the south. But the Alawites are back on the agenda. I mean, Shada can't have sanctions. These sanctions that are removed off of Syria are tentative, right? They're tentative. And I suspect we might hear more from MAGA folks on this. MAGA folks are making fun of the fact that that the US is palling up, Trump is palling up to the head of Al Qaeda and former deputy head of ISIS. They're making fun of it. MIGA folks in the US are not. All right. So I just think we're having some extreme narrative busting now. I do want to point to this because, as we mentioned on Thursday, the Cradle law, published an exclusive that the Russian military troops were looking to set up 9 military positions in Quneitra, southern Syria, abutting the governorate that abuts the Golan Heights. And people are like, the Russians sold out. And I was saying, look, you got to look to the Israelis to see if this is good for Israel or bad for Israel. And initially, the Israelis tried to spin this for all they were worth by saying, no, no, no. Netanyahu spoken to Putin didn't really explain how that conversation had any relevance to Russian troops moving to the area, but said, yeah, we want protection from these people. So it's good that they're going to be there. And now Netanyahu is not only blasting the Russian troops being there, he's really incensed, okay? So incensed that Israel carried out, I think it was last Thursday, overflights throughout Syria, kind of like to show who's boss without being able to do anything. Because, if they hit a Russian military officer, what's going to happen to Israel? It's not going to go unanswered. And instead, what Netanyahu is suggesting is, and it is just the way he was quoted, but it sounds like he's going to start inciting separatist Kurds in the north again, because he's mad that he may lose his expansionist dream in the south with the imposition of Russian troops to hold him back. So he's going to now trigger his Kurdish project again, which is going to really, really piss off the Turks, who are in a indirect confrontation with Israel in the Syrian theater, right? Um, and it is going, because the Americans are going to support the Israelis on this. Turkey is going to be pushed back into the Iran Russian orbit over this issue, because when it comes to separatist Kurds, Turkey gets right on talking points and action with the Iranians, with the Iraqis, with the Syrians.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean that's interesting. No, I mean I totally see what you're saying, but I don't want to give my opinion on this because
No, you
because for me
should. You should.
no
You
no
should.
I don't think I'm not eligible because for me Israel, Turkey, and Russia are just on the best of terms, and they have little slip ups here and there, and I think I'll leave
You
that part
see,
to
though,
you.
Seema, a lot of
Uh,
people in the comments will agree with you. So it's worth having that conversation.
Definitely, but I mean no, I mean Karim, any thoughts? No, I mean I like your perspective. I just don't share it. Can you anything about Syria, Lebanon, Gaza? Um,
No,
nothing in
يعني شارمين
particular.
said it يعني. I don't.
Yeah,
There's
You
nothing to
guys are
add.
being very polite with me.
No,
It's freaking me out.
no, I'm
no,
chill.
Sharmin. I said it before.
I'm not trying to be polite. By the
I
way, this
said it
is
before.
me.
Last time when we were together. For me, Russia going in Syria again is highly likely to protect Israel more than to protect the Syrians.
What does Israel need protection from? Has
If
anyone
there's,
ever attacked Israel?
yeah, for instance, during Bashar al-Assad, they
No.
refused to
Since
allow.
since since Jolani
Yes,
came in,
yes,
has anyone attacked Israel? Has anyone from
no,
Jolani's crew,
no.
from Al Qaeda or
They will
ISIS?
never attack.
uh,
I'm not talking
Correct.
about Julani.
So
I'm not
why
talking
do
about Julani. Uh,
someone else is going to attack?
yeah, yeah, of course.
Who? Who?
Any patriotic Syrian can attack Israel.
No, listen, Karim. They
Sharmin,
No,
don't
but
need
that's true
another
on an
Sharmin,
country.
there's
individual
list
basis.
on Wikipedia of individuals attacking Israel.
Listen,
So
the
what's weird about
Israelis are
that?
expanding in that area. Okay, they've
Yes,
not a worry in the world. They don't need a foreign country's troops to protect them. They love when attacks happen because then it justifies even more land grabs. And Netanyahu's now disclosed reaction to Russian troops being there, they tried to spin this, and now he is incensed. Okay, this is gone. And here's the thing, there is no way Russian troops would be in there without Shara getting an okay
طب
from the
another
Americans. No, you
another
do
question.
realize
You said
that.
it,
You
Sharmin.
do.
I want to
Yeah.
ask you,
Okay, I think I
why
have to
would
moderate. I'm not
yeah,
doing a
No,
good
you
job.
don't. We're
I,
having a
go
why?
discussion.
ahead, Karim.
This is how
Go
we
ahead.
have debates in,
Thank
in,
you,
in
Seema.
West Asia, guys.
Okay, I am Putin. I am Russia. Okay, I
Mhm.
have Syria, which is nothing currently in the world, and I have Israel, which is very beloved by the West, and they have intelligence, and they have to offer me many things. Why would I stand with Julani against Israel? Why would I, as Russia currently, in during the يعني into war with Ukraine, and they need the West, and they need the East, and they need everything? Why would I put myself in a situation that will anger Israel?
For First of all, and it went back to what I just said about MAGA versus MIGA.
Yeah.
The line Trump is having to walk is thinner and thinner every day. Okay. He absolutely refused Netanyahu's regime change plan in Iran. He
For
wanted to
now.
get in. Yes, but that's what we're talking about. We're talking about
Yeah.
actions, not propaganda, right?
Yeah.
Trump doesn't want forever wars. He loses his MAGA base with that. He's lost his MAGA base, or part of his MAGA base, not just on Israel, right? But also on the prolonged war in Ukraine and sending weapons to Ukraine, correct? Um, Getting Russia in there is a way to stop Netanyahu. Now, you don't have to see this as Trump being anti Israel, but Netanyahu has become a bigger pain in the ass to every single one of the leaders of allied countries, countries allied to Israel. All right. And so it's a way to thwart Netanyahu keeping one theater down, because don't forget, Israel wants those weapons. It needs American weapons to execute on any front, right? The Russians want to keep Syria as a base, okay? Otherwise, they'd never do this. If Lebanon asked the Russians to come in, they wouldn't come in. Syria was a strategic um, country for the Russians. They have decades of relations, and they know. I mean, Shada knows. Don't the Gulf countries are very cozy with Russia too. I think all the countries involved were okay with Russia coming in, because even the Turks, because the Israelis needed to be stopped somehow. You know how you only had 200 American soldiers in northern Syria to stop the entire taking of that territory by the entire Syrian army, by the entire Russian forces there, and by allied forces there? Just need 200 soldiers. You just need 100 Russian soldiers and 9 points of Quneitra for the Israelis to stop attacking.
But
Do you,
my question is, did the Israelis stop because they're expanding every day? Like you're saying, post Netanyahu's visit into inside the buffer zone, quote unquote, the occupied. Like they're. I mean, every day they're detaining. They may be killing occasionally. They are expanding, setting up outposts. Like how Russian presence is supposed to stop this? You're saying, or you just mean all out bombing?
I think it'll stop it in the way that Americans being there stopped it. It didn't mean that there weren't attacks on the American positions or their allies in the region. It just meant that nobody had the nerve to go, full force. And I think that will happen with there. There will be the Russians traditionally in the Syrian theater. They didn't they tried to negotiate settlements in these areas, and for them to be present there means that a discussion about southern Syria will have to take place. This is how far you
Okay.
get to stay. This is how far. That just means, that doesn't mean a solution. It means managing, demilitarizing, setting rules of engagement, okay, and stopping a regular daily onslaught where the Israelis could march into Damascus next, okay? So that's
Okay.
how I'm reading this now. But important to me is that Shara would never have flown to Moscow to talk to Putin about this without an okay by the Americans, without an okay by the Gulf countries, without an okay from Turkey. You
I get
understand
that.
this? And that is another way we're seeing Trump try to mitigate, all right, the MAGA versus MIGA problem he has at home by
Okay.
letting someone else step into a theater and take Israel's ire, right?
I yeah, I understand the perspective. I'm just not sure how angry Netanyahu is about the Russian presence in South Syria. Like he
Okay.
very well could be. I'm just not sure. I don't know. Like
I mean, he
if you could,
lashed out over the weekend. There was a tweet. I may have sent it in the group or not. So we can discuss this as it goes forward. You
right.
can't,
And
we can't jump to conclusions. We whoever is trying to push forth a policy, whatever country, however strong or weak you are, you do hit obstacles. Things do change.
mm,
Events are triggered that move the trajectory in a different direction. You have to always look at what are the interests, the overriding interests of a nation state at that moment, given the conditions and the criteria that are impacting that situation.
right. I
So,
think we need more time to assess like the
yeah,
relations between players. I think we need time to assess Russia's end game and even things like the deal with between the Kurds and Damascus, what will happen with that because there are so many obstacles. I There's something you said like about which I agree, but I when you said Trump doesn't want forever wars, you mean forever wars that can like hurt them or hurt Israel, like Iran, but like a forever war in Lebanon and Gaza is fine because it's like I don't know. I mean,
I
I
don't
don't.
think, see, I mean, I don't think so. I think, they're getting pushback. The fact that the Lebanese government has basically put their hands up and said, dude, there's nothing we can do to disarm the resistance, right? And then the commander in chief of the Lebanese army calls Israel the enemy, okay? The Israeli enemy blew their minds. Certain things are going to change. And don't forget, Lebanon's not just doesn't just have to answer to the Americans. It answers to the Saudis. It answers to the French. There are different players in the mix, and the Saudis and the French don't want an Israeli full-out Israeli war in Lebanon, whereas the Americans don't care. Right. So there are so many factors at play here. It's never just one, is what I'm saying.
Hmm.
Tomorrow, the Russians could actually make it possible for Israel to normalize with the Syrian government, and you'll be like, there you go. Putin's a full on Zionist, but actually, the Israelis, we've pointed this out. I think you guys have also agreed with this. The Israelis never necessarily wanted the normalization with Syria that Trump wanted, because they would be able to just take, as long as there wasn't an agreement between them, Israel could be, aggressive and land grab in Syria. Do you see what I'm saying? If the Russians help advance some kind of ceasefire between the two, that is not in Israel's interests, FYI.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. By the way, I don't know if we talked about this, but I think we did cover it, um, indirectly related. But we were talking about Trump and Gaza and forever wars. Just Israel's genocide in Gaza draining NATO's TNT reserves. I mean, that's interesting, is it not? This Polish MP said on 21 November that Europe can't secure enough TNT for its own defense or for Ukraine because Nitrochem, Poland's sole producer and therefore the continent's largest TNT supplier, is bound by contracts sending much of its output to the US, where it's being used to manufacture the MK-84 and Blue 109 bombs that we saw supplied to Israel for Gaza and Lebanon, but mostly Gaza. So this has left Poland with barely a month's worth of TNT for wartime, and has pushed European militaries into a severe shortage. And in fact, the Polish TNT Nitrochem is in fact a former Nazi arms site that helped fuel Israel's bombing of Gaza. I don't know if you have any comments on that. I just thought I'd bring it up because it was something we covered in recent days, but I found it amusing. So
Yeah, well, we know that Israel's allies have a shortage because they've just had to nonstop over 2 years provide weapons for Israel that can't make it themselves. We talked, I think, about how, and we really need to dig into this at the cradle, and we will, how Trump is apparently making the Israelis pay for weapons, whereas Biden didn't. And Israel is paying for them by issuing Israeli bonds. Who on earth would buy Israeli bonds except stupid American institutions that have Zionists on the board and are making this happen? Eventually,
The Gulf
you know,
countries.
Gulf
eventually,
countries.
well,
The Gulf countries.
we can see a lot of who buys Israeli bonds. We
But
really have to do a deep dive on this. But I want to say something, like somebody brought up this weekend to me. God, I have such a bad memory on these things. Um, that the U.S.'s national debt is $37 trillion, right? And I'm bringing this up because someone in the comments say that Charlene is under the perpetual perception the U.S. empire is further along, the timeline of collapse than it actually is. So I mentioned this because we all know the U.S. national debt to be 37 trillion every few months now, because it's accelerating, right? As interest piles up. So every few months it adds another trillion, and then it'll soon be every few weeks. But that was just public debt. That was government debt. So I looked up the private debt that the United States now has. And, I did like one of those AI answer things, right? And between domestic households and, US companies, right, the debt that they privately have is almost $60 trillion. 60 trillion. Combined, the US national debt is almost $100 trillion. So, am I thinking the US is further along the collapse than you think? Let me just say something. If the US, the whole debt thing triggers not even a default, but basically people, the dollar hemorrhaging support. And between this year and next year, way more global central banks are holding the dollars, way more have diversified into other currencies. You really just need the holding of dollars to fall behind a certain threshold. I don't know what that threshold is. Is it 50%? I don't know. But that's when the US stops being the global reserve currency. And at that point, who's going to buy US bonds? Who's going to buy the paper, basically, that the US issues to be able to pay back its interest? All right. And are banks going to be lending to their private customers who have double the amount of debt than the US government has, right? Are they going to be lending? Are they going to be calling in these debts? Are individual debts going to be going into default? Are corporate debts going to be going to default in the United States? Once the US loses its position, or the dollar loses its position as the global reserve currency, what happens is the US can't just print money to pay for its wars. They can't have 800 military bases around the world. They can't even service their airlines and pay salaries. We just saw a shutdown of government. They don't have that. They can print money to pay for these things now, but when the dollar loses its position globally, they can't even pay out that money. The US dollar will collapse so quickly, not just as a reserve currency, but in terms of depreciation. And that makes nothing affordable anymore. So, yeah, I do think, because behind the scenes, and US media doesn't want to headline this often, but the state to state transactions taking place out of Western currencies, the dollar and the euro more specifically, and in local currencies, is creating confidence in local currencies and regional trade based on national currencies. And then, of course, you have major, these states starting to move their holdings of currencies into a basket of currencies, non-US ones. Many of them are hoarding gold. We gave some statistics on the last show about, I think, central banks now moving into gold as part of their holdings in a substantial way across the world, not just global South central banks, but Western ones as well. So all you need for US power projection to collapse is for the dollar to fail. And that is on the horizon.
Karim, any closing remarks before we wrap up?
Yeah, I am not an economist, but I think if what Charmaine is saying will happen, countries surrounding the United States or in the sphere of the Western policy will suffer more than the United States, because as I say, there is no alternative. If the United States economy collapses, the whole world will collapse, including China and Russia and India, and even Iran will collapse more, because everybody have one system, which is the Western system, which is Swift is Western, and you have the dollar is Western, credit card, Visa cards, everything is Western.
Karim, since
Unless
at
there is
least
no,
2012,
yes,
many of these countries, including countries like Iran and India, which did their first swap oil for rupees in 2012 and bartering. Okay.
maybe these are less than 1% of
No,
their
Karim,
economy.
you do know about digital currencies. You do know about the RMB, right? The Chinese yuan,
Yeah,
digital. All these countries, BRICS countries, SCO countries, in all of East Asia now does digital currency swaps in each other's current. It's happened, and the confidence, because it's accelerated. The confidence, and yeah, I'll take yuan, I'll take rupees, that has grown. You're acting as though, don't forget when the US, because the subprime mortgage collapse in 2007, 2008, When that happened, major US banks, too big to fail, did fail, right? They tried to stem the bleeding by just throwing money at the banks, right? It wasn't like saving a, it was saving the system, the financial capitalism that is all the US government cares about these days, but it couldn't, fix the problem. The problem has grown. These banks are worse in behaviors than they used to be. Nobody went to jail for this stuff, and for you to even suggest that because of by the way, India didn't collapse, China didn't collapse when that happened. You definitely felt a wave of repercussions, but nobody collapsed. Now these countries have been operating within other systems, non-SWIFT systems, for years. They started thinking about it then, and now that's increased exponentially in the trade between countries for quite some years now. So they are less exposed to a US economic collapse. They will be out of the
So you're
dollar.
telling
So the dollar's not going to
Sharmeen, you're
collapse,
telling me
Karim.
now, لحظة.
Wait, let me
طيب.
just finish this. The dollar's not going to collapse as the reserve currency until most banks don't have over 50% of their deposits
Exactly,
in
that's what I'm
dollars,
telling
right?
you. They are
But
less
that
than
number is
1%.
declining every single year. The number of dollars they keep in their holdings has been declining because people don't want to have that exposure. And they finally realized confidently that they can live without that exposure, that they can transact, they can do business outside of SWIFT and within local currencies. Do you get my point?
Yeah, that's exactly that's what I'm saying. There's no alternative. You just said it. There's only SWIFT. Yeah, and that's one. Second, and you have China. If we're talking
No,
about that,
there isn't
also.
SWIFT.
Wait,
What are
wait,
you
wait, wait,
talking
wait.
about? You know how
Well,
many
Karim, just
countries were
let Karim
cut?
finish.
Okay.
One sec.
So we're talking about debt. I mean, China has in percentage the same debt of the United States. I think they have like 16, 17 trillion dollar. And the United States have like between 34 and 37. I didn't check the numbers before we came. So and the economy of the United States is double the economy of China. So I think that is the same. So that's what I was saying. If this happens to the United States and the dollar will collapse, many countries will suffer. I didn't say they collapse; they will
Yeah.
suffer, including China and other countries, because there's many U.S. bonds that are being purchased by China. These will be worthless, which also will affect their economy. Again, I'm not an economist, but reading what the countries are doing and the money that's being like funneled from one and another, I don't see an alternative currently that's being implemented and also being trusted by several countries. We see BRICS, they are talking about a currency which didn't happen till now.
They're not
uh,
really talking about a currency. The BRICS has never said we're going to do a currency. People have talked about it, but nobody's ever. They don't even. Some BRICS members have even said no. We're not even thinking about it realistically. They're talking about transaction systems. But what I want to say to you, when you said everyone uses SWIFT, you see, this is where the Americans made the mistake. They sanctioned enough big players or threatened to sanction them that people left SWIFT. When the Ukraine war happened, wait, let me finish. When the Ukraine war happened and they threatened to take hundreds of billions of Russian currency, okay, to freeze them or seize them, everybody, every country in the world started diversifying. The Americans have also pointed out, American economists have also pointed this out. We've made a real mistake going for big players. Not everyone's in SWIFT. Iran's not in SWIFT. Venezuela's not in SWIFT. Russia's not in SWIFT. These are major countries with a major commodity or two, okay, which made other countries necessarily have to work with these countries because they need the resources to transact in ways outside of SWIFT. But this didn't just start with the Ukraine war. I've been watching about it, and I wrote an article, by the way, in 2012 called How Iran Changed the World. And it was about how cutting Iran out of SWIFT started a process that is only going to get worse for the Americans. Please read that article because obviously the world has changed. in these 13 years since I wrote it. You can find it on my archive, mideastshuffle.com. But you got to read it because it really calls out when the Americans start to undermine the very system, global financial system that has benefited them. That's when the trouble started for them. And they did that. They did that through sanctions. They're doing it through tariffs. They've done it by cutting people off of SWIFT, making SWIFT optional. Okay. They've undermined their entire global financial system. And so everybody is doing business outside the dollar now. Everybody is able or working to do business outside of SWIFT now. Sorry. We've gone well over time. We're at
I
one
know.
hour
We
and 30
have,
minutes. Let's wrap
I
it up.
have been a terrible moderator here. I have been so lenient with everyone. Um I just wanted to say to wrap this up that I think our viewers agree with both Karim and Charmine. I think they see Charmine's points but believe that that world hasn't arrived yet, which is fair enough. Karim also makes good points.
I
Uh,
just wanted to. It's
yeah, but then
30
she's going to
seconds.
respond
30
to
seconds.
you.
No, no, she will.
No, we're not in a
Don't let
boxing
her
ring,
respond.
Seema. You don't
Don't
have
let
to
her
wrap
respond.
it up.
I just want to say something. We often talk about petroleum and like heavy machinery being purchased by countries and other countries and being in and paying in rupees, but we interpret what's happening. Also, there's billions and trillions of dollars in microtransactions, and this is also have no solution. Meaning that if you're sitting in Mongolia, you want to buy a game and play on your PlayStation or buy like coins inside your Android phone, this also is only being paid via Swift. There's no alternative for this. We often don't talk about this, but there's trillions and billions of dollars that are being yani, which is in virtual money and in the virtual world that is being purchased and paid for. And unfortunately, most of them are American companies, and they are all using Swift.
No, the
Yes,
US
Charmaine,
has
that's
a certain
100%.
size of the global economy. It doesn't have 50% or more of the global economy.
In
When I'm,
technology, they have 90%,
you
Charmaine.
you know what?
Android, Android,
There's no
Apple.
country that will be an
طيب.
economic power with just technology and no manufacturing. We can get into the nitty gritty of this, but like really to think that everyone transacting through SWIFT is not transacting in the dollar either. More and more countries are transacting outside the dollar, even within SWIFT.
Okay.
All right,
No,
love you and leave you.
that could be wrong, but anyways, you have to acknowledge that the tide has turned, and more countries have an interest in doing otherwise. We
I know,
can wait and
Charmaine, we
watch.
still need time. For instance, just to give some
Oh, it
examples.
could
For
happen. It
instance,
could happen
China.
next year.
Yeah, no, no. For instance, there's sectors, Charmaine, that are like 90% controlled by the United States, and one of them is these transactions. And you have the technology and the OS, which is operating systems. They are controlled by the United States. If you want
Correct.
Windows, if you want to buy any program to Windows or to your iPhone or to your Android, these are three operating systems which are more than 90% used worldwide. They are American. Yani we have others like Oxygen and Linux, which is Scandinavian, and Oxygen, which is Chinese. They are used with yani less than 5% of the world.
Well,
So
Michael
that's what
Burry
I'm talking
just
about.
shorted Nvidia and Palantir. So I don't know. A lot of people are talking about the US's AI bubble. Karim, there's a lot of bubbles that
Mm.
just rhetoric and propaganda create. Okay. We can go forever on this. Let's just wrap it up. You can even have the last word, Karim. You can say bye.
I will have it.
No, I'm gonna have the last word. I'm gonna have the last word. So we will. I'm sure this conversation will be picked up again, and Esteban hopefully will be hosting that one. No, I'm kidding. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for everybody who's been watching. And everybody who's been supporting us. I want to remind you to leave a like on your way out. I also want to remind you that we, as the Cradle, are aiming to become fully reader funded. And that's why if you haven't become a patron subscriber yet, and you are able to, we would really appreciate it. Because just to give you an idea, I mean, we basically hit 1 million readers a month. We basically have around 40K subscribers on YouTube, yet we haven't reached 1K patrons supporters. So if we basically just need like 0.5% of our readers to help us out and become a regular Patreon member for just literally $5 a month. That way, we will be able to bring you even more exclusive content and be consistent with that exclusive content. We'll be able to put out
Yeah.
much more stuff,
And please
whether
don't
it's
forget
exclusive.
that
Yeah,
we want Patreons starting now to send us questions before Thursday so we can answer them in a Patreon only segment on Thursdays. So send us your questions by Monday every
for sure.
week, and by on Thursdays we'll have a special section just for patrons.
So yeah, I mean, that would be great if you were able to. Please consider supporting us. And that is all for today. You will be joined by Esteban next time, and inshallah, Sharmeen and Kareem. And thank you for being great audience as always. Your comments are always amusing. All right, you guys. So we'll see you next time. Thank you so much, Sharmeen and Kareem.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.